welcome to the Frederick Board of Trustees meeting on October 22nd. We are happy that you're here. We will get our meeting started by starting our roll this evening, please.
Trustee Mahan?
Here.
Trustee DeValdi?
Here.
Trustee March?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Here.
Trustee Lamach? Here. Mayor Kreitz?
Here.
Trustee Padilla?
Here.
Mayor, you have enough for quorum.
Thank you so much. At this time, I would ask that you all stand, remove your hats, and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we have a full agenda tonight, but Brian, I believe we have a couple of updates to our approved agenda. Would you like to fill in the board on those changes, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the board. Tonight, we are going to ask for 2 items to be removed from the agenda. The first item is Resolution 24R59, Boards, Committees, Commissions, and Appointments. We're going to move that to December, as we will have more of the committee members, appointees that will be here at that meeting. The second item was a request by the applicant, Quick Trip, Resolution 24R60, consideration of a request for Quick Trip's monument sign height variance. The request from the applicant is to table that to January, so we will have the item back to you in January. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I am assuming most of you are in attendance tonight to either hear about a particular item regarding oil and gas or to speak on such, but are there any members who were here to speak regarding the item that has just been tabled, which is Resolution 24R60 to request the request of Quick Trip to have a sign height variance? Are there any members here tonight to speak on that? No. Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move swiftly into public comment. This portion of our agenda is provided to allow members of our audience to provide comments to the town board. Please sign in and I will call you. If your comments or concerns require an action, that item or items will need to be placed on a later agenda. And please limit the time of your comments to 3 minutes. Of course, you can have as much time as you'd like. If we see that there are more than 15 to 20 speakers tonight, I might ask that we be conscientious of those 3 minutes. We also, just to keep it conducive to the items we have on our agenda tonight, I would ask that maybe at this time public comment be focused on items that either are not on the agenda tonight or items outside of the oil and gas item so that we can hear your public comment during that item when we're addressing the presentation of that item. Does that sound okay? Okay.
And Mayor, just for the record, there is no items or nobody has signed up for general public comment.
Okay.
Just for oil and gas.
Okay, no general public comment.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go into staff reports, please.
Yes, Mayor and members of the board, one of the items just for, I think it's noteworthy just for the public is we had our annual Santa's Cops. And I know the board just did a picture and the check was presented. Just want to thank the staff. That is a great event. It provides, Christmas to a number of families in the Carbon Valley area. So the collaboration of Firestone, Frederick, and Dacona, we really appreciate that annual event. The other item I just wanted to mention, we're actually going to have Sierra come up, our economic development administrator, just to give you a couple updates on the downtown area.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees. I just wanted to give a quick update. There are a couple new businesses in our downtown that I wanted to take a moment to celebrate. Lola's Kitchen, now open at 206 5th Street, which is the previous location of Peel's Handcrafted Pizza. They're open for business beginning, their hours are beginning at 11 during the day for lunch. So they're open for lunch and into dinner during the week. And then the Butternut Kitchen, which is now open at 515 Oak Street, which is the previous location of the Bookstore and the Blonde. And she's open more breakfast into early lunch, so I think it's 7 to 2 p.m.
Those are great, thank you.
Thank you.
And then in addition, Mayor and members of the board, just again, thanks to the team for the the Trick or Treat, the Tiny Tear Town.
Great.
It was a wonderful event. We engaged a number of the businesses on Fifth Street. It's a new addition this year, and thanks to communications as well as economic development, Public Works, the police department, and pulling this together. It was probably one of the most well-attended events that we've had
Great.
in regards to the Halloween events for the downtown of Frederick. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to the team for prioritizing that. We really appreciate that. That's great. Any questions for Brian on the staff report tonight? No questions? All right. We'll move into our consent agenda. Our consent agenda items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion and vote. There will be no separate discussion of consent agenda items unless a board member so requests, in which case we will move that we will remove that consent agenda item and consider it at the end of the consent agenda discussion. Would anyone like to remove any items from your consent agenda this evening? If not, some direction from the board, please.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Thank you.
Trustee March,
Yes.
Trustee Tavaldi,
Yes.
Trustee Padilla,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Yes.
Trustee Mahan,
Yes.
Trustee Lamach.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right, having tabled item I, the first action agenda item would be item J, an ordinance 1400 for our land use code amendment on Article 9. I believe Ali Van Dudecamp and Matt Sura are both presenting tonight. Just for those that are participating in the audience, I ask that we show Ms. Dudecamp and Mr. Sura time and respect to present this matter. And then I'd be happy to open up public comment for you all to share after they've presented kind of what we're talking about and why we're discussing it tonight. So thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Board of Trustees, and everyone here attending tonight. We really appreciate seeing all the faces. This item in front of you this evening is Land Use Code Amendments to Article 9 regarding oil and gas production. This item aligns with our strategic plan goal of community and economic vitality, more specifically updating our land use code. The item also aligns with the goal of providing a safe and secure community. The town of Frederick has a long history of supporting oil and gas, and so much so that we have 603 wells within our small 16 square miles. In 2019, with the passing of Senate Bill 19-181, we had the opportunity to create additional regulations, and except for minor amendments, have not made changes to our oil and gas regulations thus far. Which brings me to this slide. This is a map of the now 27 spill locations located within the town boundaries we've had in the last 2 years. With the increased pressure of development across our town and the number of spills we've had, all of us here at the town have been concerned. And we want to understand how the pressure of this increased development and the number of spills can interact together. This heightened concern led to a moratorium being approved in April of 2024. And since that moratorium, staff has worked many hours with outside counsel, Matt Sura, to draft regulations that you have before you this evening. And since Matt's the expert, I will hand over the rest of the presentation to him.
Thank you, Allie, council members. Matt Sura, special counsel to the town of Frederick. These are environmental features that are discussed within your land use plan for the town of Frederick. As Allie mentioned, we've got 16 square miles, and there's a lot of environmental features. Environmental features are typically something that you would have to avoid or make special arrangements around for development. And those special features in this include the wetlands over to the west. We've got a floodplain there as well. Mines throughout much of Frederick, and Firestone. And then every one of those dots is an oil and gas well, either a existing oil and gas well that has been plugged or that is currently producing or capable of producing. And this is ECMC, and Energy and Carbon Management Commission, was formerly known as Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, just changed its name. And this map you can pull up at the ECMC website. What you're looking at here, every one of those red dots is an oil and gas well. Those long lines that you see are horizontal drilling lines. Those are wells that go down about 1.5 miles. They turn that drill bit and they go out as long as 3 miles. If those lines are purple, they've already been drilled. If they're green, they have not yet been drilled. You'll see then there's not much left to drill. This is the last gasp of the oil and gas development on the Front Range we're expecting. It is being done by horizontal drilling, and all but 1 square mile here in section 27 and a little bit of the section to the section 28 there to the left is all that really is left to drill within the town of Frederick horizontally. As Allie mentioned, the history of Frederick is in oil and gas is pretty colorful. And in fact, it's got a featured part of the history book of oil and gas regulations within the state of Colorado. Because in 1994, the town of Frederick was one of the first towns to make it illegal to drill without a permit, a local permit. And that seems like something that any local government would have the right to do for any industry, but that at the time was not considered legal by the state of Colorado. And they took the town to court over the fact that they were asking for $100,000 permit fee, noise and visual mitigation measures, and a 350-foot setback from homes. And it was taken to court, and the town of Frederick lost. It was considered that was out of their jurisdiction, that they were in conflict with the state regulations, and therefore the state regulations would have to apply. And at the time, the state regulations only provided for a 150-foot setback from homes. Senate Bill 19181 came along and allowed governments for the first time to regulate the oil and gas industry like you would any other industry. And also required ECMC to, instead of fostering oil and gas development, to actually protect public health, safety, and welfare. That was the first time their mission was to protect public health rather than to protect the industry. And again, this is another slide that you can find on the ECMC website. This is the well status in the town of Frederick. Right now, you're currently sitting at a reflection point. You've got half the wells are plugged and abandoned of the 600 wells within the town, and half of them are still active. We asked you to rank what you were most interested in seeing in these regulations, and you said setbacks from homes was one of the most things that you're most interested in, as well as public notice and meetings and that process. And so we looked at a process that would make sense for this, and we used a conditional use process that is already in existence in your land use code, and thought that would allow for the right amount of process for neighbors, for neighborhood meetings, and ultimately the decision would come to you. We did make some changes, however, and those include in the pre-application conference, there's more information that has to be provided, including an alternative location analysis and some other documents that are actually already required by ECMC. Neighborhood meetings have to be, instead of the 1,000-foot notice, we're asking for a half-mile notice throughout the application submittal and notice of application. All of that has gone from 1,000 feet to a half a mile. And just within the last week and a half, ECMC just changed their regulations, and they're now requiring notice to a half mile. We also provided a standards document, and this standards document sits alongside, is going to be adopted with, if you choose to, adopted with the code revisions that we're proposing, but it's going to sit outside of the code, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, This is really getting into the weeds as to regulations of the oil and gas industry. We don't want to clutter up the code, but more importantly, it's also things that are changing so fastly, technologies, requirements at the ECMC, things that we want to be able to change without having to go through a full hearing, and therefore allowing for those to be changed more easily as something outside of the code. Location restrictions. The first thing that we looked at in adopting these, creating these regulations is where does it make sense for oil and gas development to be allowed within the town of Frederick? And the first tool that any local government looks to is their zoning regulations. Zoning is a way to allow for some uses and separate them from other uses that aren't compatible. And we've got industrial zones, we've got residential zones, we've got very dense residential zones. And so the staff looked at that and created locations that where oil and gas would be allowed was in agricultural districts, estate districts, residential low district, low density district, business light industrial, industrial district, planned unit development overlay district, where oil and gas is actually allowed in the PUD. And this is what the map would look like. All the blue areas are go zones where the zoning would currently allow for oil and gas development if that was adopted. And some of the areas are currently PUD, and we didn't actually do the research to find out whether or not they would allow for oil and gas. We were assuming that they wouldn't. And location restrictions as to, we're going to talk now about the restrictions of the oil and gas industry to homes, the distances and setbacks and protections of new oil and gas development coming into Frederick and location restrictions imposed on them. And the first one is a 2,000-foot setback from future school facilities, hospitals, and assisted living facilities. These are areas, buildings that have populations that aren't easily mobilized. Certainly an Alzheimer's care facility is an example of that. A school is an example of that. And that is in line actually with ECMC regulations. So there is, that is in line with state regulation entirely. Where we depart a little bit is the oil and gas shall be located at least 1,000 feet from residences on residential lots. And the ECMC has that at 500 feet. The exception being if they were able to get that resident, that impacted resident or landowner to sign a waiver to allow for them to come closer than the 1,000 feet, then it would be allowed. So moving into other location restrictions, we're looking at rivers and streams, a 500-foot setback, ditches that transport water, and we've said 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet is somewhat of a setback where they have to demonstrate that they are taking care of considerations for human health, people that live there, that they have made considerations and are put things in their proposal that will ensure that those neighbors are protected. And demonstrate it to you, and you decide that you can allow them to be less than 2,000 feet. What we're looking at here are the setback buffers. We've got the 2,000-foot buffer is in yellow, the 1,000-foot buffer is in blue, and then the white is a 500-foot buffer. So a 500-foot buffer is, you can't go there even in ECMC regulations without getting permit. And certainly you can see that there's a lot of people living there, so that wouldn't make sense anyway. Within 1,000 feet, you're still really close to those neighborhoods. And we're proposing that that be an area that it should be considered no-go unless those residents say that they agree that that could be there. And the yellow is 2,000 feet, and that is, again, an area where they can demonstrate to you, without having the approval of all the neighbors, that they can drill there safely. And if you agree that they can drill there safely, you can allow them to drill there. Anything that is not in color is an area that they could drill. So we've talked about new oil and gas development moving to a neighborhood, moving to existing residences. What about an existing oil and gas development and new homes being built near those oil and gas developments? And that's what this deals with in 9.18. 9.18 could be called reverse setbacks or reciprocal setbacks, but it is how close can a new home be built to an existing oil and gas facility? And we're looking at that there should be no new facilities, no new homes or schools within 200 feet of an oil and gas production facility, and that could be a tank battery. 1 to 4 wells is 200 feet. 5 to 14 wells, 350 feet. 15 or more wells, 500 feet. 15 or more wells are those huge industrial complexes where you have those multi-well pads where they're doing that horizontal drilling, and there's a lot of equipment on site, and there's typically quite a few, there's trucks going back and forth, and it's really more of an industrial facility. And that's what a 200-foot setback looks like. These are existing oil and gas locations that are in operation, and that would be the 200-foot setback. So looking into pre-production occupancy, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is when the oil and gas development is going the hardest. They work from 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if they're doing a multi-well pad, it can be drilling and hydraulic fracking operations for more than a year. This is an industrial facility. And as an industrial facility, we don't want new neighbors moving there in the middle of that mess. And so we've retained that 1,000-foot setback for the time that they're actually drilling. And for the year afterwards when they're producing the most oil and gas. Now these wells, particularly these hydraulically fractured wells, come in big. They come in and they're producing the most the first month that they're producing than they're ever produced in the rest of the life of the well. And over the first 2 years, they're going to produce 75% of what that well will produce over its lifetime. So a lot of production up front, a lot of trucks, a lot of traffic, and a lot of oil and gas pressures, and therefore safety issues. And so we've considered that and said that there would be at least a year pause before people would be able to move in within 1,000 feet of a new oil and gas location. And after that year, they could be within 200 feet or whatever would dictate how many wells are on there. And then the post-production phase, and this could be a plugging phase. And we're continuing with the 200-foot of a well bore. And this is not of, it's 200 feet from the actual side of the house to the well bore itself. So it's not considering the lot line. And we're allowing that to be reduced to 100 by 50 foot setback if they're able to prove 3 things. 1, they can find the well. And this is sometimes very difficult to do, in that the ECMC regulations and the ECMC map don't really know exactly where these wells are, and sometimes they can be 20 feet off. They can be more than that. And so finding that wellhead and knowing where it is important. Second, knowing that the well is not leaking currently. I think that we all recognize that if it's leaking, it's likely leaking methane. Natural gas has been percolating up from downhole, and that is a hazard, a health hazard. It's an ignition hazard. It's a number of ways that could be hazardous. And then the third is that it has been plugged properly to today's standards. We know now much more than we did back in 1970s how to plug these wells well. One of the things you have to do is make sure that you have plenty of cement downhole and that you are putting enough cement between the surface and any potable water supplies. We have to make sure that there is no annulus pressure, that there's pressure outside the casing would indicate that there's a leak somewhere. Make sure that all of that is been taken care of and been taken care of well. Why do we need this? What's that? Okay, well, we did try this out. Why do we need this? Well, just last year in Johnstown, right around this time, there was an explosion of oil, natural gas, and drilling fluids that came out of a previously plugged well. And it shot a geyser about 150 feet in the air of this greenish yellow fluid. And people in the area didn't know what it was. Nobody really knew what it was, except when they looked, they found that there was an old oil and gas well that had been plugged in the 1990s. This is not in 1993, actually. It's not 1970. It's not one of those older wells. This is something that is relatively new in the terms of how old that these wells can be. And it failed. And when it failed, that cement, we all walk on cement sidewalks and we can see cracks there. Well, sometimes that same sort of cracks happen within the downhole in these oil and gas well bores. And that's exactly what happened here. And that energy from the natural gas pushed through all of the oil, gas, and these well fluids up into the air. And this occurred for about a day. The first few bursts, and then it was just hissing natural gas until ECMC crews came in and put a stop to it and then completely replugged and abandoned this well. This is in Johnstown. This is our neighbor to the north. So plugged and abandoned wells, what a 100-foot setback would look like is what you see before you. It does have an impact on development, but these are areas that can be used as parks. They can be used as flood mitigation. They can be used as roundabouts. There's all sorts of things that you can do with an oil and gas well that has been plugged. You certainly can't put a house over it because of the possibility of there being any sort of crack, and that crack leaking methane into the subfloor, and that could be really problematic, as we saw in Firestone. We don't want anything like that. If there is a need to address it, there needs to be enough room to be able to bring equipment on site and to be able to address it safely without having to knock somebody's home down or take off a wall. So that's why we're looking at these reverse setbacks. And what ECMC has told us, Energy and Carbon Management Commission, is that they believe that 50 feet by 100 feet is what is needed for the equipment that they need to bring in there. And they want to have an easement, some way of getting a truck back there, because if it's just surrounded on all sides and it's just a courtyard, that's not going to work because you still have to get trucks in there. So an ability to get an access and some enough area to be able to maneuver and be able to get to that well bore and to make the repairs necessary. And so ECMC, again, they're the ones that said that it was 50 by 100. But you see Fort Collins has just stuck with 150 feet. Greeley has gone with a 50-foot setback. Erie is something similar to what we're proposing here. They're at 150 feet, but if you can prove that it is been plugged properly, it can go to 100 by 50. Longmont is 150 feet, and Weld County, generally, Weld County is at 50 feet. We have responded to a number of comments. There are a number of comments that came in through, there was Frederick Firestone Fire Protection District had some comments that we responded to. There were comments that came through from American Petroleum Institute and that we responded to. And yeah, I've shown you this already. I've sent you this. And if you have any questions about those changes, there were minor changes, but I thought good suggestions, and we made those. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
After I'm done.
After you're done.
Thanks, Matt. This project was properly noticed according to the requirements in our Frederick Land Use Code. Staff did do additional outreach to our three largest producers, KBK, Oxy, and Civitas, plus industry trade groups and outside referral agencies to request comments prior to the public hearing this evening. And we also have received roughly 20 plus additional comments or letters or maps since the packet was put on the website. I did print those in hard copy. They're on your desks for you this evening. The Planning Commission met on October 3rd, 2024. The Planning Commission heard the Natural Medicine Healing Center and Oil and Gas Production Land Use Code amendments as one item. So they made one motion to approve all of the amendments. Finding the lengthy ordinance pages overwhelming, we decided to split them for you all tonight. But the commission did vote 3-2 to approve the code amendments with conditions. The 4 conditions that were placed on the code amendments were all related to the Natural Medicine Healing Center item. Here are some this one missing. There are 4 review criteria required. One of these needs to be met in order for a code amendment to be approved. Staff does believe that all 4 of the review criteria are being met with these proposed code amendments. There are recommended motions here up on the screen for you this evening. Staff is recommending that with the approval of the Ordinance 1400, we also rescind Ordinance 1392, which created the temporary moratorium. And now we're ready for questions. You have any for us?
Thank you. This would be a good time for board. If you have any questions for staff, now would be a good time for that. And then we can address public comment from there. Any questions so far? Yes.
Thank you, Allie, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. I really appreciate it and all the work that we've done over the last many months on this, so I really appreciate it. Just some kind of basic questions. From what I understand, we addressed, can you go back to the slide where it talks about addressing some of those things that the API, American Petroleum Institute letter brought up?
The next one. Yep.
So from what I understand, the standards document was supposed to be kind of administratively changed, but now has to be brought before the board for a resolution. I think which is good. One of the things that I saw in API's letter that I don't know that we addressed was we're requiring that everything has electrification versus generators being used because we assert that there's electricity provided throughout the town. How can you say more about that in terms of how do we know that's true, that everywhere that they would like to drill, there would be electricity available?
Thank you for the question. And this is an important issue for a couple of reasons. One is if they're not using electricity, they're going to have to be generating their own power, which means a full-time generator, which is noise, that's emissions. You know, are they burning diesel? Are they burning natural gas? They're going to be burning something. And that's going to cause some amount of nuisance and air pollution concerns. And the other is that we are a municipality, and United Power has stated that they're going to serve the town of Frederick. They have the ability to do so, particularly if you're looking at an oil and gas location. An oil and gas location is, running of some equipment. It could be a pump jack, could be something like a separator, but there's not a huge draw on electricity. So like we would require any other store or any other industry, being supplied with the amount of electricity that would be necessary for an apartment building or a number of homes is not too much to ask. Where it does get a little bit harder is if you're asking for them to be able to use electricity and three-line power to power electric drilling. And that does take a certain amount of electricity. And so we've provided for United to be able to say whether or not they think that they can provide that level of electricity. And we have changed the language slightly to ensure that it's really up to United Power's discretion, that we're not in a position to tell them what they can and can't do. We want to hear from them if they think they can.
And then there was a desire to specifically identify water quality and quantity expectations, sort of clarity in our ordinance about that issue. Do you feel like we address this? Or do you feel like we, and I may have misread that, but does the state already define the water quality standards to the appropriate level? It just, the letter stated there was some confusion.
Yeah, so what we ended up doing is removing that portion, asking for them to more or less give us the same information they're giving the state. So there's a requirement to give the state the information as to where you're going to use these millions of gallons for hydraulic fracturing. To fracture one well is 5 million gallons, as an example. And that water has to come from somewhere. And we want to know where it's coming from. And I think that that's fair because there's going to have to be a lay flat hose that is going from that source of the water to the location. The last thing we want, and what is prohibited in the proposed regulations, is water trucks, because you're talking about hundreds of water trucks a day to bring that much water to the location. So getting it there by lay flat hose is important. And then where does the water get disposed of? We want to know at least the access route that they're taking to get rid of that water once it comes back up whole. And the amount of water is something that they have to report to ECMC. We're no longer going to be asking that specific type of information.
Any other questions?
Let's ask one thing. It sounded like we had a lot of stuff that is already regulations in ECMC. It seems cumbersome for us to just repeat all of that stuff and require it to be submitted. Can't we just have them give us the ECMC documents? Or is that what you're saying in there?
We are saying that allowing them to use ECMC documents is absolutely going to be allowed, but it is your requirement, and therefore you get to make the decision. We were talking about earlier that between 1,000 feet to 2,000 feet, if they want to get in that kind of gray zone and want to be able to prove to you that they can do it safely, ECMC requires them to prove that the protections that they're providing are going to be substantially equivalent to if they were more than 2,000 feet away. And ECMC gets to make that call. By bringing these regulations in-house and bringing them and making them your regulations, you get to make that decision. Because nobody can drill within the town of Frederick or Firestone or Johnstown without two permits, one from the local government and one from the state government. So it gives you that extra protection and allows you to make the decisions.
We'll be considering ECMC documents as part of matter of record.
Absolutely, it can be part of a matter of record, and if the documents, in most cases they will be, we're asking for similar or the same documents, they can use those same documents, so it's no extra burden on the operator, but it is allowing us to have an opportunity to look at those documents for ourselves.
I want to make sure that that's clear, because I just think that double doing stuff is cumbersome to our staff too. You know, they end up having to read all this stuff that's already been read by someone else. You know, we're not experts at this stuff, so anyway, that's my opinion of that one.
And that's a really good point. And one of the provisions that we have in here, because we don't have experts on staff, is to provide for expert review and have the operator pay for it. Because it is a lot to ask for looking at a noise study to make sure that the noise coming from this location is not going to be a nuisance to the nearby neighborhood. Traffic studies, you have people that can do that. There are other air quality studies that you probably would want to have an expert look at rather than somebody in-house. So it would be a combination of that, but it's not going to be a burden on existing staff beyond what they already do. And if it is, you can bring in experts and have them paid for.
How about that API comment that we're getting outside of what we're allowed to regulate?
Yeah, the only one that they mentioned that on is pipelines, and I respectfully disagree. Yeah, you absolutely have the right to be able to cite pipelines, and they did say that there is some federal jurisdiction over transmission lines and safety regulations, and we're not doing that. We're not providing safety regulations on transmission lines, but we do get to say where they go through the town and have to, because they're going to be using right-of-ways, they're going to be using crosswalks. You need to know where they are.
Didn't they make comments on that too, on the plugging?
Yes, they did.
Like that we have no jurisdiction to?
Right, and on that point, we did make a change. I'll just go to the next. Analysts of plugged and decommissioned wells, they said that we can't require the plugging and abandoning of wells, and that's true. So we've changed that require to request.
And Trustee DeValdi, if I could add, just as an example, when we were doing the storm drain improvements on Bella Rosa, we ran into a gas line that we didn't know existed. And so having some of that information locally will help us to identify those things, because when we reached out to the ECMC, they told us they didn't know who it belonged to. We reached out to several folks and then ended up taking some time, but finding out that it was an old abandoned line and it was okay to remove, but we didn't know that when we first found it.
I have one more overview question. So I know my concern mostly all revolved around the fact we have all these old wells that are leaking and creating problems, and we need to figure out how to get. I mean, so far I haven't really heard a lot that says we're able to do anything about that really with a regulation. I mean, is there anything specifically? I know there's some bonds and things or some money that when I read through there that's in there, which that's the kind of stuff that I feel like is the important stuff that, you know, anybody that does business and there's potentially something that's going to be left there when they're done has to put up money to say, if we can't finish, you can do it with this money. I mean, are we able to really fix any of this issue with some of these things?
We are, but there are a number of wells that have been allowed before Frederick got into the permitting game.
Can't do anything with that.
Very difficult to do anything about, but we can require them to report to us as to what they're doing in terms of emergency response, what they've done in terms of any leaks or repairs, if they've had any notice of alleged violations in town. We're going to get that information and can respond to that. Moreover, if they want to do any sort of expansion whatsoever, then our regulations come back into place, and they have to get a permit to get any sort of expansion of that use or a change that is going to impact public health and safety.
Which I kind of struggled a little bit in reading through it, that I didn't know for sure if when something like that happened, is that then considered a new well? I mean, would that fall into that? I guess I didn't really see in there where I was confident, okay, if somebody goes in and they're going to rework this thing, that it falls into this category, you know?
Right. And so a reworking, and we did give, and I can bring that up.
There was a lot of reading there, so I mean,
Yeah. And I appreciate that. So if it's a rework or if it's a maintenance issue, we want them to maintain their wells. Right. We want them to rework their wells. And if they need to, get them back up and running, that is absolutely allowed. But if they're going to re-drill or if they're going to refracture a new formation that they're not currently producing, that makes it a new well. For all intents and purposes, a well that is going to be, probably 20 to 30 years is how long that these things last. If they refrac it, and that you're talking another 20 or 30 years. And suddenly that neighborhood is going to be dealing with that industrial use for another 20 or 30 years that they didn't anticipate. And frankly, they need to go through and have that use approved. We're not going to be in that position because most of the wells that are they're either going to be plugged and abandoned, or if they're owned by one operator, they're not allowed to refracture or go into any new formations. Fortunately, they're limited to the formation that they're in. And so we're just looking at how to plug them at this point.
I guess that was one of the things too. I mean, as I tried to get as much information as I could about this, it just seemed like there's just not a whole lot of opportunity to actually do much more new well in the town of Frederick. But I mean, clearly there's a little, but I mean, is that stating a fairly accurate point that
there's about 2 square miles left, in a 16 square mile town. That's not a lot. And yet my guess is that they'll eventually go for everything. And so how they do that, certainly the areas that are left and haven't been developed on the east, I think are probably most easily accessed, going west, that haven't been accessed on the west. Probably going west outside of town would be the easiest way to access those. So I don't think that they're going to have to necessarily be within town, but that is certainly an option.
I have so many questions? I don't
No, please. Questions are good. That's good. Discussion is good.
like. My mind thinks about then when you start annexing. So somebody comes. I mean, I'm sure staff has thought about that, right? So, I mean, is there some situation where we annex and this is going to cause a huge problem?
I would say, generally speaking, we're fairly landlocked all around. What you're talking about, most likely the scenario is those unincorporated enclaves that currently exist, mostly on the west side of I-25. But generally speaking, and looking at the maps, those are already impacted by oil and gas. And so I would imagine that we're not going to be growing much further beyond those boundaries because we're hitting Erie, Dacono, Firestone, Fort Lupton. We're pretty contained in terms of the ability to grow further out. I guess Longmont as well as our neighbor.
Good try. Trustee Padilla, do you have another question? And maybe we'll come back to Chad.
Chad asked my question on how does this help us manage our current situation?
Yeah.
So you were reading my mind as usual, Chad. Thank you.
Because this is how this all started, and I feel like I don't know if it's actually helping
Yeah.
any existing problems we have.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's, at least saying we're serious about it.
Well, we want responsible oil and gas production. We require it, yes.
And I think the intent, as it's pointed up on the slide right now, we can't forcibly close wells. And so that's kind of getting to the point of the actual issue that's kind of generated this. But that being said, we have an opportunity to potentially not exacerbate an already hard problem as we move forward.
But we do have the ability to make sure that people that are going to do anything to these wells that are existing, that we can do like we could on a building permit. They want to go mess with this thing and they've got a bunch of problems. You can't touch it until you fix what's wrong there, right?
Absolutely right.
Just like a building permit situation.
That's right.
Part of what Trustee DeVelde is sharing in frustration are, the ramifications of the spills, the 27 spills that we've had since 2021, which is an unreasonable amount of spills that, quite frankly, most are left up to the town of Frederick to clean up, to pay for, to continue to keep our community safe. So my question on that is, and to Trustee DeVelde's point, Allie, you mentioned that you reached out to our largest oil and gas partners, Civitas, Occidental, and KPK. I see that you've heard back from Civitas. Have you heard from the other two parties?
Thanks, Mayor. We did receive a comment letter from all three of them. Actually, KPK's was just an email with some comments.
Okay. And out of those spills, Are the bulk of those from one party?
Yes, those I would say 90% of them are from KPK.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions over here?
I have a comment. My biggest concern with anything that has to do with oil and gas drilling, whether it be old or newer or whatever, is I want to make sure that we as a board do everything we possibly can to protect every person that's a resident and every business inside of town of Frederick, whatever it is we've got to do. And even if it's overkill in some respects, overkill sometimes is necessary so that someone doesn't get hurt badly with this stuff, because it can go south quickly with this. And the incident in Johnstown, I was amazed when I saw that, and it ended up, I guess no one really got hurt with that.
Great.
Yeah, but we've got one right here in Firestone off 119 that people weren't so lucky because of not watching what these people have been doing. I mean, 603 oil wells in Frederick. Is that what we have total? That's a lot of oil wells. So that's my biggest concern. Whatever we have to do, even if it's a little bit of overkill to protect everyone, that's what we, in my opinion, that's what we need to do.
I agree with Trustee March. That my concern has been and will be continuing to protect the citizens of Frederick. I don't want to see wells that are left to be, or spills that are left to be just left there. I mean, we've got responsibility and reaction to the care of that. We've got children in areas, we've got families, we've got elderly, and I think we need to just be aware of
I think that this item, this issue is, I mean, there's not a solution tonight that we'd be able to resolve all of the concerns. Public safety absolutely is the number one priority. Knowing that each one of these wells to plug and abandon is roughly $300,000 to do so. The other consideration is how many times an amenity that our community has requested to build or have in the town of Frederick in our 16 square miles, and have said, I've either purchased land or I'm interested in purchasing land to bring that amenity to your community, but there are 5 or 6 wells that I would need to plug and abandon myself because the operator has either filed bankruptcy or is no longer operating, so therefore it's my responsibility. So typically they say to us, hey, Frederick, if you want a grocery store, or if you want a hospital, if you want these amenities, you need to plug and abandon those wells at $300,000 a piece. So there's also public safety is the most important component to that. But then there's that intangible that we maybe don't think about very often. It's the economic development that we are losing every day because an amenity, a business, small, medium, or large, regardless of industry, has turned Frederick down because there is so much oil and gas production that it is an undue hardship for them to build in the town of Frederick. So something to consider as well. Are you all ready to hear some public comment? Do you have any other questions for staff? No?
No, wait.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Allie.
Thank you, man. Yeah.
As a matter of formality, and I'll take a peek, thank you, at our public comment speakers, if you don't mind, I'll address you just by first name, if you're okay. I don't want to offend anyone with my pronunciation, but is there in the room anyone who is speaking on behalf of a congregation or of a larger demographic who would like to go first? That might be helpful so that all the rest of you in the room say, that is exactly my voice and what I wanted to say, and they're speaking on my behalf tonight. Anywhere I should start, or it doesn't matter to you? Just go for it.
Just go for it. Okay.
Okay. All right. You're Brady?
Brady, yes.
Great. Hi, Brady.
Buddy, thanks for making time for us, especially on short notice. We realized we were not quite aware of what was happening here, and so we're jumping on board quickly. So my name is Brady Thornton. I've been the pastor of the church now for 17 years. We've been in the Minor Square building that entire time. We were hoping it would only be 5 years, but 17 years in, we realized that God's timetable is different from ours. But we want to move on, but we want to stay in Frederick as best as we possibly can. We love this town. We love this community. We might not be the most visible church in the community, but we believe that our calling is to take care of the needs that are going on inside of the people's homes while you guys are considering the issues that are happening outside of people's homes. And we believe we're having a fairly significant effect to that end. And so we're grateful for the chance to be here. We want to continue to move forward. But we can't move forward where we are. And our church has outgrown that. Our church is now has about 600 people that call it their home. It's too much for that space. In 2018, we purchased 40 acres of land on the north side of Tipple Parkway, just west of the Westview neighborhood, for the purpose of putting our church building on that. And since that time, we have it's been a delight to work with the town and all of the staff. They're fantastic. But what we have been essentially chasing over the course of this time has been the desires of various iterations of town, either management or leadership, with regard to what would fit best on that particular piece of property. So over the years, we've been told that the town's greatest need is for affordable housing. So we began the process of trying to accumulate the resources necessary to provide for the town affordable housing, including purchasing water shares that would have been sufficient, according to the surrounding communities around us, to build affordable housing. Frederick was slow in adopting that, and that delayed our ability to develop the land. Although we had interested home builders, the willingness to embrace the water usage was something that slowed us down. At some point, the town told us that that what they needed was jobs. There was enough homes. What they needed was jobs. And so we began investigating, trying to put not industrial, but some form of zoning code that would allow for a version that's slightly less than light industrial. And so it feels like for the last 5 years, our church has been chasing the desires of what we could get approved to be put on that piece of property. And now, with the approval of water shares and with the approval of the necessity for housing seems to be the greatest concern at this point in time for the town. We found a home buyer that's suitable for what can be a partnership between us that allows us to stay in town, gives the town what it's looking for. But it's also on a piece of property that has a significant amount of current and former oil and gas activity on it. And in fact, we believe that our property is fairly unique in that the oil and gas is somewhat outside the parameters of what happens on a lot of other pieces of land. And so as the home builder came to the town on Wednesday of last week to do his pre-application meeting, we were made aware of this ordinance. And that's not anybody's fault, that's ours. We should have been better invested into the process. That's why I apologize to you for coming at the late hour. But what we believe is that we believe we bring value to the town. We believe we're trying to bring a valuable asset to the town. We want to stay. Our people have invested thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get us to this point, with the target being the 50-foot setback around existing oil and gas wells that would be plugged and abandoned. We've been fighting for 5 years with KP Kaufman, with what's now Occidental, to get these wells plugged. And it seems as though an arrangement is in place now for us that within the next 6 months, our property could be entirely clean of oil and gas facilities, including paying to plug and abandon a KP Kaufman well. So most of the oil and gas activity will have been done within the last year as far as plugging and abandoning to current standards. But the language that's found in the codes at this point in time, we believe would have a disproportionate and severe burden upon our church's ability to move forward and build. Of course, we have concerns for the safety and the public that call this town their home. That's why we call this town our home. That's why we want to stay here. But we believe that there are measures in place that would provide for that and would allow for us to continue to aim for a target that we've been aiming for 5 years and not have to once again change everything else. We believe that if this measure is adopted as spoken to, particularly with regard to plugged and abandoned wells, then it would compel us to have essentially our property rendered to zero value. We would not be able to even sell the land for what we bought it for 5 years ago. And that's what we wanted to do tonight, is just to come out and say, this is the concerns. It's easy when you're making decisions to look and saying in a broad perspective, but to look at the specific nature of what this particular piece of property is and to essentially use it as a case study to say, this is how this ruling is going to impact this piece of land, and is this what we want for our town? That's what we wanted to pause and just present to you tonight, that this is, along with a lot of the people in this room here, are part of our church. And if you were to look out your window, you'd see a whole lot more who are watching the event live. We didn't want to creep on you guys or be threatening or anything, but we have the notice here, signed statements from a lot of the town of Frederick residents that are here, and I'll just put these on a table, just basically saying that they're all from Frederick and they agree with where we're at. But everyone out there is from Dacono, Firestone, Hudson, Meade, Thornton, Brighton, Erie. They come from all over the place. And so your decision tonight has an impact more than just on Frederick people, but on a lot of people who are coming here and call this the place where they want to come and love the people of this town. So tonight we've got a couple other people who are much more technically adept at this than I am, but I wanted to at least stand up in front of you and saying, on behalf of our congregation, to please pause and consider at the very least an exemption for us through this particular task, because it has been the goal for such a long time. We are so close to the finish line. We don't think we're particularly exceptional, but the circumstances are. And so we'd like your consideration in that regard. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you, Brady.
Thank you. My name is Steve Gerber. I've been working on this project. I'm a member of the congregation. I've been working with Autumn and Allie and their staff for a while on this. I would like to. I gave you a lengthy summary of my comments. In there, I outlined a brief summary of my experience, my expertise for addressing oil and gas concerns. I want to make it clear that our concern, while we should be concerned about everything that's been said as far as all the oil and gas, we are concerned about abandoned wells on our property. And that is what we are directing our comments on tonight. So I would first like to briefly address the alternative compliance buffer reduction plan. Second, I'd like to speak to the impact that the proposed setback limits would have on Life Fellowship Church. And then finally, I would like to propose a suggested plan of action that I believe would allow the town to move forward in whatever manner you decide, but at the same time would allow Life Fellowship to continue to move forward as well. It's been made clear as to what the setbacks are right now. The one caveat I would add is the 50-foot by 100-foot setback is not going to work, because that allows for 25 feet on each side and 50 feet on another. Weld County requires 50, so at a minimum, it's going to have to be 100 by 100 just to comply with Weld County. As I reviewed the comparison chart that was in the law office of Matthew Sura put in there, I noticed that I didn't necessarily the numbers he put in there didn't necessarily correspond to the written text. The end result was that Frederick will be, out of all the communities that they looked at, will have the most strict setback requirement of all those communities. When I look at the alternative compliance buffer reduction plan analysis requirements, I first of all want to ask, which I understand one of your comments, does the town of Frederick have the expertise to oversee that program? I have completed hundreds of site assessments related to contaminated sites. I've done many on oil and gas wells for major oil companies. The cost of this assessment will run tens of thousands of dollars. If remediation is required, it'll end up in hundreds of thousands. There's another thing that's in there that the plan asks for. There's a statement that they want that a reduced buffer would not pose a greater health and safety risk for future residents or users of the site. Nobody will ever give that statement. It's not going to get a flat statement. Nobody's going to guarantee anything that's done. And what I don't understand, the ECMC does this. And for the town to be taking this on doesn't, to me, to make sense when they have oversight of this already. So, but the end result is that I believe that the ambiguity and what's required of this assessment plan will be so extensive, so expensive, it will never be used. Nobody will ever attempt it, especially considering that the fact that once you go through the process, there still is no guarantee that you're going to get the reduced setback. Therefore, the default will be 200 feet. The town, or the Church of Life Fellowship will be in that case. We will not do that assessment. And so let me then just speak to you about how significant this impact is going to be on a Life Fellowship if I can. The first one is a total loss of the property use because of the unique characteristics of our property. And if you don't mind, I would like to have our engineer explain exactly the characteristics and why that applies, how that happens at our property. Jim?
Hi, Jim Brostovich, civil engineer with Civil Resources, 8308 Colorado Boulevard, Firestone. I've been doing civil engineering.
Would you like a handout? I brought some larger handouts of the map that I emailed you earlier. Would that be of value?
Sure. Yep. Yes.
You all should have it in your packet, but that's okay.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I don't have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so I've been doing civil engineering for about 30 years here, and I got involved with the church about 4 years ago. I was introduced to the church by an existing home builder client of mine who was interested in potentially buying their property for a development of relatively small houses. And in my evaluation of the property with that other client, we determined that approximately half of this site is unbuildable because we can't sewer it. It's simply too low to get sewer going east to Westview. We worked on pretty much every conceivable alternative to make that possible. Short of bringing in a massive amount of imported fill, it just doesn't work. So really it's only the eastern part of the site that is possible to develop with anything that requires sewer. Unfortunately, that's also where the 4 wells are. So I've done multiple plans. The plan that you have is not a plan that we're submitting for land use. This is really a density study. It was to help try to get developers, a home builder interested in purchasing the property. This is not a land use application that you see in front of you. It's really a density study. What I've heard from my clients is somewhere in a density, something like is on that plan, which shows about 185 units plus or minus, would make the project pencil with all of the other infrastructure that is required to develop this project. The setback restrictions without the smaller one that Steve just talked about would take 30 to 45% of the density out of this property. 35 to 40, and that without really reducing the cost of development, because the infrastructure would be nearly the same, the cost of entitlement would be nearly the same, the cost of the land is up for debate, but basically that makes the project uneconomical to develop for any home builder. And I've been trying to bring people to Life Fellowship for the last 4 years to try to help them meet their goals of developing this property and then ultimately building the church. So I'm happy to go into more detail about any of the technical things if you have questions, but really wanted to reiterate what Brady said is true.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, so the first issue that we have is the land becomes undevelopable. That will eliminate, in the plan that he has, if a developer wanted to do that, that would be a loss of over $3 million in revenue. Okay. But in reality, we would be losing out over $6 million of income because we can't develop that property as it is. The second thing that has happened, and I might add, we are now under contract with KB Homes to do this. We went under contract on October 1st. This here, if we kick the can down the road, if we do any sort of number of things here, that contract is going to fall apart because there are time constraints tied to that contract right now that are in progress as we speak. The other thing that happened is Pastor mentioned the water share loan that we had to take out, that we did that in order to enhance the property, make it more saleable. And so we put out over $2 million to buy those water shares. And we found a party that loaned us that money. Unfortunately, shortly, we thought it was all going to come together very quickly, and it didn't. COVID destroyed an opportunity. And ever since then, we have been accumulating interest on $2 million that we have to repay. Further, a further kicking the can down the road or doing anything is simply going to continue to drive up that same that value of what is owned on that lot or on that amount. And so it's critical that we move forward as quickly as possible. The third thing that's happened is, again, Pastor mentioned that we have the opportunity. Occidental has 4 wells. One was abandoned in 2014. One was abandoned this last January. We just got a letter from Occidental that they are going to be abandoning in the near future. We are now under negotiation with KPK to abandon their well. We are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to have that done. If this gets kicked down the road, that's going to fall apart, and that well, again, may not be abandoned on that with regard to that. The other thing that happens is that that we lose, if we lose that KPK well abandonment, we have an extensive 350-foot circle on there, and you can see that on your drawing. You can see the impact that has on our property and what we have available for us to build on that property. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but it significantly reduces the ministry that will be available for our people in the congregation and for our ministry to the town of Frederick because of land that will be inaccessible. And then maybe most extensively is the loss of a meeting place. We have about 1,000 days left of lease on our current property. Whether or not we can get this all done and get a building to move into in that period of time is going to be very tight no matter what. But if this gets kicked down any further, it's going to make it almost impossible, short of an intervention of God himself. which is possible. So I would propose that you consider actions for tonight. I have come up with 4 actions that that would that the town, I believe, could take. One would be to pass this ordinance as it is, which would be, forgetting about anything else that's been said, would be devastating to Life Fellowship for the very reasons that I previously discussed. The second option would be to table for further internal discussion. But again, as I've just outlined, that would have significant impact with Life Fellowship as well. Kicking the can down the road because of the contracts that are currently in place will have a significant impact on those contracts and therefore on Life Fellowship. A third option I thought of was that you simply make the setback requirement equal to the 50 feet that is Weld County. My guess is that would take some kind of administrative action that you couldn't act on tonight. So again, that would kick the can down the road and would put us in a bind of how long is this going to happen, what's going to happen to our existing contracts. What I would like to suggest is that the town, hopefully tonight, will pick any of those 3 options that you want to take, but give Life Fellowship an exemption to this ordinance for our property. And I think that we have demonstrated an extenuating circumstances that are adequate to show that our property is unique, that no other property will have to contend with what we have. So based on those extenuating circumstances, I would ask that whatever option you pick and however you choose to move forward, Life Fellowship be exempted from this ordinance so that we can continue to move forward with our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We do have quite a few other congregation members who have requested to speak tonight. I'm happy to just call your name, and if you would like to take that time, you're welcome to. You can yield to someone else, or you can just let me know if you have changed your mind. That's okay as well. So I have Heather Thornton as well this evening.
I'm happy that Steve and Brady have both been able to speak, and I'm satisfied with the thing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Heather. Marcia.
Thank you for your time, trustees, and I yield my time to my husband. He's worked real hard on this, and I go with what he says.
And I'm done.
Thank you. Matthew. Matthew Holcomb. Hi, would you join us at the podium, please? Are you speaking? Okay, sorry. I just want those that are streaming to be able to hear you from the microphone. Thank you.
Sure thing. Yep, my name is Matthew Holcomb. Been here resident for 8 years. Just wanted to point out that there's a lot of landowners, families, farmers who have also made decisions in the past when approached by oil and gas companies to make the decision to allow them on the property. Also, in the future, thinking that they can make use of the land as well. They're probably in the same situation that we are. So we're not the only ones that would be impacted by this. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Katrina? Katrina? She stepped out. Okay, I'll come back. Oh, hi, Katrina. That's okay.
Hello, my name is
Hi.
Katrina. I have to thank you all, first of all, as the trustees and the mayor. I have a 2-year-old son at home, and every community event that you do is the best day of his life. So the most recent Frederick Fire Department event was all that he talks about now. So thank you. That being said, I love raising my family here. This is my 6-month-old Elliot. And as a member of the Congregation of Life Fellowship, it's incredibly important to me that not only do I live in the community that I'm in, but I also get to serve the community that I live in. And being able to have a physical location within the town of Frederick area has been such a blessing because I get to be alongside my neighbors while also serving them in the community that we're in. And so if this ordinance does pass, from what I understand, it may prohibit our building from being able to be directly across from the Frederick High School. My husband and I serve with the youth group, the youth program at our church, and we love getting to participate in a way that is meaningfully building up the young people of our community. So the teenagers in the high school, as well as a lot of our students attend Coleridge Middle School, as well as Thunder Valley. And being able to not only have physical presence here, but especially across from the high school, there's an incredible impact that we can have with the students that attend that high school, especially being directly across from them. I have a lot of crazy and wild ideas, but it's not, it requires a building. And currently we don't have that. So again, I trust that you all have our town's interest at heart, and especially I appreciate the heart that you have for the citizens. Being one of them and raising a family here is one of the biggest blessings that we have had as part of the city. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I have Jim on here twice. Jim, would you like to share anything else? He's in the hallway or not, but nothing further. Okay, all right. That is all I have on this matter for public comment. Did we miss anyone? Would anyone like to share anything? Okay, would you join us at the podium, please, and just let us know your name?
Accidentally written my O and G on there.
Hi.
Hello there, I'm William Wright. If you're behind me, you know me as that really loud guy who helps teach Sunday school. And if you're in front of me, you know me as the guy who had an epileptic seizure in your choir room one time. Nice to see you, Mr. Brown. I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic being here because when I'm in here, I think of the town hall down the street, down the way, and I love it very much specifically because of the lovely white color on the outside. That is, of course, my own arrogance because I helped paint that, along with a lot of the people in the church, and not just us as adults, but me when I was 13 helping out there. Our youth group has been in this community helping out in big ways for a very long time. We've already been adding that value to the community in a ton of ways. And when I see that, I am reminded of the fact that we are not just members of this community, just like anyone who buys a house here is. We're people who are contributing to it. This is a measure meant to protect our town and keep people safe, and that's excellent. That's fantastic. But as I'm hearing from Trustee Taveldi there, it doesn't seem to be the kind of solution we need for the moment. It doesn't seem to be the sort of thing that is effectively getting us where we need to be. What I understand is this, is that Life Frederick has already contributed in great ways to our community, and it'll continue to do so. Pastor Brady earlier said we're not the most noticeable church, and the church is not the building and the people, and there I would disagree with him, because if you're going around the Tri-Towns area in early June, you see the kids of Life Fellowship, the teenagers, and not just of our church, but people welcomed into our church who want to volunteer and help out. They're out there working. People drive by thinking, what are these teenagers doing? They should be playing video games and smoking weed, not helping their community. So it's fantastic that we get to have that chance to build up our community and impact it. We are not just another people who need a little convention hall to meet up, but we are an active member of people trying to make Frederick and the surrounding areas a better place. I'm happy to know that from this time we've actually made something of this community, found ways to improve it, found ways to put our fingerprints on it. Some ways literally, because I was not a very good painter, so there's probably a couple smears on the paint job in there. And it delights me that we have the chance to do so with your help. If an exception is what it takes, then that would be a delight. If it is the rejection of this idea, then that would be a delight, so that we can carry on in doing what we're doing. I hope you can consider this, and I thank you for hearing us out tonight.
Thank you, William.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, anyone else, or would you like William to be? I mean, it's a good way to end it. Nice job. Good delivery. Any other community members wish to share any comments? No. May I ask Matt to join us at the podium for just one more moment, please? And Allie, if you'd like to, you're welcome to. I think there were a couple of comments, and I know you heard them all, and I know you value them all. Are there any comments, questions, concerns that were raised this evening that you could answer today, that you desire to answer, or that you have the ability to answer at this time?
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to do that. The intent of the 200-foot setback is to promote safety and, frankly, to promote the landowner doing their due diligence and doing the three things that I mentioned: finding the well, making sure that it isn't leaking currently, and doing the analysis to determine that it was plugged properly. And if it wasn't plugged properly, to plug it properly, which we are told is $30,000 to $40,000, according to ECMC in their financial assurance rulemaking just last year. And so I think that if a landowner were to make that investment, that makes that investment better. It gives them the peace of mind that they're not going to be having somebody having to dig that up or to deal with that problem if it's in a park or if it's in the middle of a street or next to a home. It gives the town the reassurance that we're doing everything we can to make sure that that's done safely, and that we have a peace of mind that in the event that down the road, 50, 60, 80 years down the road, we have to revisit that well, we have the space to do so safely. So I do believe that there's a way to make any arrangement and make anything work, but it is going to have to be a little bit more strategic than just looking at a grid pattern, outline, because there are a lot of wells in areas, and what we've seen in Dacono just across the street is that they put an oil and gas facility in the middle of a roundabout. Not what I would want, in the middle of my neighborhood or as a welcome to my neighborhood, but it is allowable use, and that would be allowed in the town as well, according to these regulations. So I don't think that it's that hundreds of thousands of dollars. At most, it would be having to replug and abandon that well, which should be about $30,000 or $40,000.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask a question, make sure I clarify, Matt, in regards to the potential conflict or overlap between Weld County's regulations and our own. It's my understanding that Weld County setbacks don't apply within the town of Frederick, so they wouldn't be cumulative.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, the Weld County, who has all unincorporated areas within Weld County, they have the 50-foot setback. More municipalities, they have the ability to set their own setbacks, and as a municipality, typically have a lot higher density neighborhoods, and therefore a greater setback is typically seen. But in the case of Greeley, they went with a 50-foot setback as well.
Okay. That's a good question. Thank you. Allie, anything you'd like to address?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I got a comment letter from United Power after I had already joined the meeting this evening. I can read the comments really quickly to you if you'd like, but generally they're asking for the ability to approve new service lines, and that it wouldn't be just a blanket "we will serve" option for them.
Does their discretion not offer that?
They're asking
their
for
purview?
discretion.
Okay,
think
that's
with
what it
their
reads currently.
Comment letter we got today at like 4:59 or 5 o'clock was requesting more or less what we've already amended to allow them to be able to say whether if they can't provide electric service to a facility, then they wouldn't be required to do so.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Any current questions from Board of Trustees?
I'm struggling with a couple of things. The Pastor Thornton, in your letter that you wrote to us, you mentioned that ridge, there was a sewer access?
Yes.
I don't totally understand that issue, and I'm not really clear with that issue from your description.
I'm having a hard time hearing in the hallway. Could you repeat that again?
Yeah, I'm having a problem with understanding where this issue with the sewer access
Yes.
to that property is.
Yep.
And why is it an issue?
So there's a topographical map will show that there's a high point through virtually the center of our property, and that's a gross exaggeration, but the center line makes it so that there's lower spots on the western half of our property that make it so that there would be no fall from the western portion of our land into the existing sewer infrastructure in the Westview neighborhood. We can't make poop flow uphill, so it's got to be start at a certain elevation to work its way down. And the land on the western side is too low. And just for what it's worth, we've gone to extensive measures to try to negotiate easements across all of the properties to take that line all the way to Eagle, if we could, just to make this property developable. But several of the people in unincorporated Weld would not cooperate with an easement. So we've explored, every conceivable option to put properties on this piece of land. I could draw it for you on the map if you'd like, but would that be helpful?
This map also, I've got another question about this map.
Yes, sir.
We didn't, and we placed an exception on this property. What would happen, and what would be our responsibility to the people that do buy a unit on this other property if something did happen? How responsible would we be?
Well, I believe that here in America, when someone buys a piece of property, that's the risk that they take. The town has properties that are built over coal mines right now. In fact, the neighborhood just east of Westview is built extensively over coal mines. We could have a collapse in there, and that would be a problem. We live in a society, particularly this chunk of land, that has pockets of potential liability that we mitigate to the best of our factors, as best as our availability. And I'm not trying to criticize. I certainly understand the burdens.
I'm not trying to criticize, but I want your take. You're asking that. It seems like you're asking for an exception in that we may do something that may not be the best for those people.
Understand.
Future residents.
Right. So the only point I would make to that end is that with the recency with which these wells are going to be abandoned, the technology, all the things that are in place, the safest wells to date in the town of Frederick that will be plugged and abandoned will be the ones on our piece of property. They will be done all to the latest specs, and so it would not go to the issues that Mr. Develdi is talking about with these old things for which there's no accountability. There's going to be significant accountability from the ones that are being done under our watch right now, and that's what we've been aiming for 5 years, and would like to have the opportunity to keep aiming to that particular end.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
A couple. You brought up the sewer issue.
Yes.
I happen to sit on the board of directors for St. Vrain Valley Sanitation
Okay.
District, so that's who would give you your sewers.
Yes.
How, if we give you an exception and you go ahead and build in the way that you would like to build, how is that going to solve your sewer problem?
It doesn't solve the sewer problem. What it does is the only places we can build on that property sit in the proximity of the wells. Mm-hmm. So if we can't build to the west and this new setbacks are to the east, there's no place for us to be able to build with sewer access. We're prohibited by town code. I believe, from what we've been told, we can't use septic. We're not allowed to use lift stations. So
lift stations are allowed. Lift stations and pumping stations are allowed. We've got them all over in the sanitation districts.
So this would be and I'm not trying to challenge you, sir, at all, but this would be an example of the kind of chasing our tail for years, because the lift stations have been something that have been suggested, and several times we've been told by engineers up there that they would not permit it in a place for which sewer access is readily available.
Well,
that's
you just stated that your developer told you that sewer access was not readily available. What I'm asking you is, did your developer look into your sewer situation that's obviously going to be a problem no matter what happens with St. Vrain Sanitation District? They're the governing body that controls your sanitary sewers. So that's who you need to talk to.
Well, we sat at the building and spoke with the lead engineer on 2 separate occasions regarding this piece of land, and that was the response. At St. Vrain, yes. Just north of Qdoba. Just north of Qdoba, in that building.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I started the church at 180 pounds, just for what it's worth. So it's been good to us.
It's all muscle.
That's it. For re-election. I'm sorry.
Can I address that?
Appreciate that.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind joining us at the podium, please.
Please, yeah, go ahead. I think
Great,
I'm finished.
super. Thanks,
gentlemen. I appreciate it.
It's not only the sewer. If you'll notice on the map, there's a huge area down there that's required for detention. Okay, that because of the slope of the property, we can't have a hole. And so it's a very uniquely designed detention pond that we have to have in order to take all the runoff that's coming off our property and discharge to the property to the east. So it's not strictly sewer, it's also detention. And as you can see, that's approximately the area that it would take. So even if we sewered that, we would still gain very little land for construction of homes on the western half side of that.
Okay, your retention or detention area is the stormwater runoff, is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's separate from sanitary.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that we have to accommodate, we're accounting for both, that the western half of the site becomes unusable, one for sanitary with the exception of lift stations, or for detention. They both impact that western part of our property.
Okay, all right.
That helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Yes, Steve. Thank you.
Can I address a comment that Matt made? Is that
Briefly, if you don't mind, please.
I'm not sure if the cost, the way the regulations, the way it's written in there, it says that the party is required to complete a site assessment or plan that is determined by the manager. I don't know who that is, if it's a town manager or if there's some other manager that determines that. The plugging and abandoning of the well doesn't seem, which is overseen by ECMC, does not appear to be a condition of whether or not that assessment is required. ECMC does an assessment when the well is abandoned. They require the oil company to do that. Our wells will be completed to that level of assessment that the ECMC requires. Maybe down the road, there could be a requirement that they have to meet your requirements. They don't have to meet your requirements. That's not what they were permitted under. Therefore, we would have to pay for any assessment that's completed. And I've done these assessments. I know what they cost. And the $100,000 is if there's remediation that's required. But it's still tens of thousands of dollars to complete the assessment that is required. And then whether or not it's acceptable, the town would then have to determine that, if you have the expertise to determine that, whether or not that assessment is adequate to meet your standards that are in your new regulations. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's these regulations are already being used in a number of local governments, including Adams County, Larimer County, and they don't require tens of thousands of dollars in an assessment if it is a well that has been plugged within the last 10 years, actually after 2007. That's when the regulations really changed, and we have a lot more wellbore integrity requirements by the ECMC, a lot more cement required downhole. Really, we don't have a problem with those wells. It's the wells that we need to really investigate where we don't know where the wells are. You know, like these wells that were plugged and abandoned back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s. Those are the ones that we really are concerned about. And I don't know what age, the wells are here. It sounds like most of the wells will be plugged, have been plugged in the last couple of years or will be plugged in the next few months, in which case they would easily apply for the 50 by 100. There wouldn't be a concern there at all. Again, the ones that we're really concerned about are the wells that we don't know. We know that there's a plugged well somewhere in that area. We don't know where it is. We don't know how it was plugged, and we don't know if it's leaking.
That's fair. Thank you, Matt. I think, if I may probably break character for my position in the last 5 years as mayor, I am going to ask the board at current to consider tabling this item. I know, it's local government, y'all. Because I think it's important to reflect on Pastor Brady's comment of taking a pause. So there have been a number of things that were mentioned tonight as recommendations. There are a number of things that we asked our staff to address. We asked our council, Matt and Allie, and those on their teams to find ways to make oil and gas production and development safer in the town of Frederick. That was our board request for public safety measures. So because those two things need to be run in parallel, I think, and strategically, I think a little bit more time to understand this property and if there are some concessions to be made or if there are some waivers to be agreed upon, I think is appropriate. So I would ask, and not for a long time, we do currently have a temporary moratorium that expires in November. So I would ask that the board consider tabling this item tonight to November 12th, which is just a few weeks away, to discuss the same matter. With that in mind, I would say all public comment tonight would be a matter of that public record. You are welcome to continue public comment on November 12th. You're welcome to submit further comment via email, phone call, however you'd like to. But everything spoken tonight will be a matter of public record and will be part of the public hearing on November 12th. Do I have support for that this evening?
I support it.
Okay, a motion on that would be helpful, please.
Madam Mayor, I would like to request tabling this item until November the 12th, 24, so that we have a little more time to consider all of the issues that have come up.
Second.
Motion and a second, thank you. We can discuss if you'd like to. Yes, please.
I appreciate it because number one, I love this town. I love that you all came. It was great to hear more about Life Fellowship Church, and thank you for all of the work and the comments. I really appreciate it. But I do think that this is a big issue with all 16 square miles in our town, and so we as a board need to consider the entire town of Frederick, and we need to consider the impact that the ordinance will have if passed. I'm concerned too. I don't want the moratorium to go on any longer than it should. And so I'm hopeful that we can come do the research that we need to do on the new information that we have and come to a decision on November 12th. I hope we can do that. I have, a few just like things that are in the weeds that I'll send to staff to sort of ask those questions that I have. But that's why I'm supporting it and seconding the motion.
The discussion over here.
I just want to echo that. I mean, the comments have been civil. I understand your plight, especially as someone who is currently working at the place that is neighboring your property, and the good that I've seen you do with those students there and in our community. It's hard because this is not about causing you any more frustration. Everything that I read in that letter has been a frustration that we've seen. I took office when COVID hit, and the frustration that I've seen from all the delays that that's caused, and just also I can understand your concerns about the speed of government. It's one of my biggest complaints of the last 5 years, and my constant frustration is it feels like the speed of government is exhausting and frustrating and doesn't help. That's not our intention, and the fact that we want to resolve this within the next meeting, not kicking it down to December or to the next year. We want to get this done. It's been our goal to make sure that this moratorium was met quickly. There's towns that go on and on and on for years, and they just keep shuffling and we don't want to be those people. So I really do appreciate the comments tonight. I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the decorum that you guys have shown. I appreciate the strength and support that you've shown for your organization and also for this community. And I think that this gives us just that little bit more time to make sure that we do what's right, not just for you guys, but for the entire community, since it is a place that everyone in this room lives and loves, and we want to keep it that way. And that's our biggest concern for all of this, is to make sure that the safety of our citizens, every single one of you, is met, and that we don't have a Firestone or a Johnstown moment. That's a nightmare that I don't think anyone wants to face. So we do appreciate that, and we will be expedient on hearing these things and getting back to them and not string you along. We want to help if we can in any way to make sure that one way or another you can move forward in what you need to do next.
Thank you.
I'm okay. I think Trustee Brown, Mayor Pro Tem Brown, I'm sorry, had said it well. During my reading and prepping for this week's meeting, I was very conflicted as to what we needed to do. We do love this town. I think the entire board has nothing but the best interest of the people and residents of Frederick, as well as the staff that works here. I think they really want to do the right thing, and we really want to do the right thing for you. So I think another 2 weeks, pushing it until November 11th.
12th, November 12th. Yes.
Till the November meeting is good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. We have a motion and a second on the floor, and we've had our discussion. Would you take the vote, please?
Trustee March?
Yes.
Trustee DeValdi?
Yes.
Trustee Lamont?
Yes.
Trustee Mahan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Trustee Padilla?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. If I may echo the sentiments already shared with you, Frederick community, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for caring about your congregation and the future residents of Frederick, as well as the current residents. We appreciate your time. I would ask that in the next few weeks, our staff spend time meeting with those at LifeBridge as often as you can to better understand the aspects of being more strategic moving forward. And as mentioned tonight, we will have another discussion on November 12th and have some direction for you all to move forward. So thank you. I'm also going to ask for a brief recess at this time.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
before we do that, while we still have an audience, I wanted to make sure I clarified something so we can manage expectations in terms of more or less what was requested to be exempt from the ordinance. Typically speaking, when a governing body is creating legislation, it applies to everyone, and you wouldn't in legislation create an exemption of legislation. More or less what they're asking for is a variance to this new ordinance. That would be a separate process that we would have to follow, not trying to obfuscate the problem, but trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So there is that option. Certainly the timeline may not line up with what's been presented this evening, but I wanted to make sure that it's clear to the folks that were coming out this evening that we can't create an exemption in a legislative policy that has to be given to the entire community
Sure.
in the same stroke of the same pen.
Okay, that's reasonable. So I don't know if everybody heard that or not, but there is not an actual exemption as requested, but it would be more of a variance. So perhaps in the days coming, your team can work with the Town of Frederick team to understand what a variance process will look like. Does that sound reasonable and fair? Yes. Okay, thank you. Let's take a 5-minute recess, please.
No, I agree with you.
I can't believe, how dare you?
No.
Fine, fine. Okay. All right, thank you for the time and the recess. We appreciate it. We should get going though, yes? Okay, we'll move into item K, ordinance 1401, please.
You have to.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees. Thank you for your time today. My name is Bailey Arvizu, and I'm going to be going over the natural medicine code amendments that we're proposing today. Prepared this with the help of Christine Franciscani, Deputy Town Attorney. It's all about finding the right spot, right?
Make sure they get turned off. That's the...
Well,
we've exhausted all technology.
We broke it.
I could also just be bad at it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Maybe you should just do it for me. Just kidding. Okay. This project was properly noticed according to our requirements in the code. So this project is in line with our strategic plan by providing updates to our land use code in connection with our goals for effective, efficient, and strategic government operations. Additionally, it's in line with our plan to make sure we're up with all the state legislation that is also happening. The history of and purpose of these amendments starts back in 2022 when the people of Colorado passed a Proposition 122, access to natural medicine, natural psychedelic substances, which was later codified as a Colorado revised statute called the Enabling Act. What this statute does is decriminalizes the personal possession, growing, sharing, and use, but not the sale of certain psychedelic substances. There are 2 natural psychedelic mushroom substances and 3 plant-based psychedelic substances that are included in this statute. While we have to permit the personal possession, growing, and sharing of these uses, we can govern the time, place, and manner of these uses. So that is what we're proposing to do with these amendments. Just one thing to note here, that we must adopt these standards by January 1st to be in line with the state statute, and because they will start issuing licenses to people. So we want to make sure that we have the proper regulations for those people who are licensed by the state. There are 3 sections that we are amending. It would be the definitions, the general commercial uses, and then the residential protection standards. There are 2 uses that we're defining here with the changes in the state statute. The first is natural medicine business, which includes the cultivation facilities, medicine product manufacturers, natural medicine testing facilities, and other businesses that are licensed through the state. And then the second use that we're defining and amending into our code would include participant consuming and experiencing the effects of related natural medicine or regulated natural medicine product under the supervision of a supervised facilitator who would be licensed through the state. So for this second use, think of a spa or a medical office. That's kind of where that use we would find that in. So the ways that we're choosing to govern the time, place, and manner, the first would be time. So we're proposing to restrict the operations of these businesses to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We're proposing to restrict the place by specifying the zone districts that these uses would be allowed. All the zone districts that we're proposing are non-residential. And then we've also put in place residential protection standards, which also include protection standards to childcare and school-related uses. Currently, we have those at 1,000 feet. And then we are also choosing to regulate the manner in which these uses could operate by proposing specific security measures, proposing odor mitigation measures, lighting is a requirement, screening, and storage. So those are all things that are addressed in our amendments. There was a discussion at Planning Commission regarding the 7 a.m. to 7
PM restriction, they had some concerns that by providing this restriction specifically in regards to the healing center use, that you may lead to some issues with people who are not fully sober at that time having to leave that facility and potentially drive, or other things would be happening. There are two reasons that staff does support leaving this restriction in place. The first would be that those people who are the facilitators who are licensed through the state would risk losing their license if they allowed this to happen. So they're incentivized to properly plan for someone to become sober after an experience that they were facilitating before letting them go. So it's kind of on their shoulders to make sure that they're in compliance with that. Otherwise, they do risk their license. The second reason...
It's not like a bar.
That's correct. Yes. The second reason that we still support leaving this restriction in place is we did review these standards with our police department, and they were in favor of having this time restriction due to safety concerns with later in the evening these uses being allowed. So kind of next steps for these proposed amendments. As I mentioned earlier, it is necessary that we make sure that this is enacted by the 1st to make sure that we capture any uses that might come into town with the regulations that we're proposing. But I would like you to think of this more of an interim update, because a lot of us don't really understand all of the connotations to these uses. This is a brand new thing to all of Colorado, and I would say most of our country as well. So there are a lot of things that are unknown in regards to this use. So I think we're going to be in a learning process throughout this next year. So we'd like to come back in the next year with a better understanding of how this will actually impact us. But we certainly didn't want to just leave the door open without any regulations up front. So interim change, next year we'll come back with some amendments after we have a better understanding. We do believe that all 4 of our review criteria are being met with the proposed code. And staff does recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the land use code amendment package. And these are the recommended emotions.
What was the planning commission's? I know, but there was things that they brought up.
Their conditions.
Did
Yes.
we implement those, or?
Yes, we did implement those. Let me just get to, I had a couple notes here. So the first was changing our setback. Initially, we had our setbacks set at 250 feet, which was in line with how we deal with liquor sales and other liquor businesses, which is a 250-foot setback. We changed it to 1,000 feet based on the recommendation of Planning Commission. Also, that is in line with what the state currently has set as the setback, which we're allowed to adjust if we'd like, but that's just in line with what the state currently has for this use. The second one was suggesting that the building entrances face a street frontage whenever possible, requiring whenever possible. And that's just kind of an additional safety measure. We don't want the primary entrances to any of these uses being behind buildings, facing an alley, anything like that. We'd like them to face a primary frontage just with a little bit more visibility. The third one was there is a standard for allowing for a legal non-conforming use, basically something that could apply for an exemption from some of our setbacks to go into a spot that maybe would have not been able to have that use. And initially, that was proposed as an administrative review process, but we're changing it based on the Planning Commission's recommendation to a conditional use. So if they wanted an exemption to the setback, they'd have to come to the board.
And part of that thought process was we have businesses downtown. There isn't really lens to have setbacks if you go down our downtown strip. So if you had somebody who's an acupuncturist or a therapist or otherwise who wanted to augment their business with that, it wouldn't be allowed in downtown. And so that was kind of the thought process of having some allowance.
And we're not talking about dispensaries, correct? I just want to make sure. Or
So
are we?
healing centers have to have the healing done on site.
Correct.
And it has to be completely done on site, and they're not allowed to
Like-
leave while they're still being healed.
Sale, but
Okay.
but like
And that's not what the other one, the first.
The other piece of it was kind of like a grow.
There we go. The natural medicine business.
That's where they're manufacturing or growing these things, and those are confined to the industrial areas.
Okay. That was my clarification.
Right. But that's not.
I thought that, but I didn't want to make sure I was way off base.
Right, and those prohibit consumption on site.
Sale is still illegal.
So, what other states have authorized? Am I right in saying that Oregon?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't know if legal has some insight.
I was gonna say, what other states have authorized it? And I'm thinking Oregon.
Right. So as far as I know, it might actually be specific to the city of Portland, and they're planning for healing, essentially what Colorado is calling healing centers.
Right, and are they ahead of us?
I believe they are ahead of us, but I don't know that any of us have looked exactly at how far they've gotten.
I'm gonna be in Portland.
Yeah.
Go microdose.
Get yourself healed.
So do some investigating.
Yeah, we need to find out.
Another point
Don't come back. It's great.
Another point for the board in terms of these interim ideas. As we went through this, Christine's done a great job of kind of noticing some inconsistencies in the state statute as provided. There's some ambiguities, and so what we anticipate is that there's going to be some state legislation in the next session to go clean it up, which is what they typically do at the state level. They pass things and then they clean it up for years to come. So we'll see what ends up happening throughout the next legislative session and what, if anything, we might need to adjust to be in harmony with those things.
I'm just thinking that they might have some suggestions on stuff to do before, or come back, when you come back with the amendments.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Another fun point for your edification is we've looked through these and kind of based our regulations off of Castle Rock and Parker, who are kind of a step ahead of us in getting these things done. The other municipality that has gone forward with regulating these kind of before us was Boulder. We opted not to do what Boulder's doing, which is a lot more loose, if you'd imagine. So we figured that Parker and Castle Rock are a little bit more aligned with what our community has a tolerance for.
We'll be right about that.
No.
We get accused of following Boulder
Often.
often, so I figured I would point that out.
No, thank you.
Clarity. Because of the zoning in particular of where the prohibited use would be, there's no way that this could be considered a home-based business.
That's correct. It would not be allowed in residential zones.
Do you mind sharing, if you have notes on it, the 3-2 vote? And I appreciate that there were conditions you've already shared, but were there further concerns by those planning commission members that had not been addressed on why they voted no?
Thank you for that question. Mainly the hesitancy was because we had initially combined the oil and gas regulations and this set of regulations together. And a lot of the reason why there may have been some hesitancy to vote yes is because they were combined and more worried about the oil and gas regulations.
Okay.
The feedback we received was we brought too much at once, and they weren't appreciative of us doing that.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Good times.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? Some direction on item K, please.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 1401, which recommends approval of the Land Use Code Amendment Package to the Board of Trustees.
Second.
Trustee Mahan?
Yes.
Trustee March?
Yes.
Trustee Padilla?
Yes.
Trustee Tavaldi?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Trustee Lamach?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Bailey, I'm not sure if I missed your first time presenting or if this was your first time presenting, but you did a very nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great job. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody else claps. We should get to clap too, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Can I ask a quick just housekeeping item on agendas moving forward? If we have an ordinance, can we call out that we're having a public hearing per ordinance on the agenda? Please.
Good idea.
Sorry, it just keeps me in check that I should have even opened it up to a public comment. I realize there's no one here, but for formality's sake, I need that to keep myself in check, please. Thank you. Okay, item M. Yay! It's me, she says. It's me.
Everyone's so excited.
Yes, we are. We're so excited.
Thank you for hanging with us. The next item up is the Frederick Forward Comprehensive Plan ratification of the Planning Commission adoption and designating the 3-mile plan. This item is a strategic plan goal under community and economic vitality. So I hope you all enjoy checking this box off later. Additionally, I would add that the comprehensive plan has the unique opportunity to support all 6 areas of the strategic plan. The request this evening is to ratify the Planning Commission's adoption of the Frederick Forward Plan and designate the future land use map as the 3-mile plan. We typically use our future land use map as the 3-mile plan. This year, it didn't come forward to you in January because we knew we would be adopting a new comprehensive plan. And so we're going to do that in one motion this evening, if you would like. And I'll hand it over to Britt.
Good to see you all again. So we'll keep this fairly brief. Wanted to summarize some aspects of the project here that you've been following along the way. Wanted to highlight community engagement. We kind of just went through and added up all the different engagement we did here as part of the comprehensive plan. So the 3 surveys together, we came 3 shy of 2,700 surveys in total, which is about 18% of your population, depending on which figure for population you use, but it's a pretty high number, so very comprehensive number of engagement. We had 2 open houses. We added all these up as well, 31 different pop-up outreach opportunities during the course of the 3 rounds of engagement. That includes the talk-in tours, different festivals, things like that. We also had 16 different stakeholder meetings, including the Prost group, Planning Commission. Also counted within that total is steering committee meetings that we had along the way, and 8 steering committee meetings as part of that. So reviewing the draft document here, we had, I guess these all come up point by point, we had a joint session between the Planning Commission and Steering Committee back in mid-June. I had a work session with you all a couple months ago on July 30th to go over the draft document. We had a final Steering Committee meeting for the comprehensive plan on August 12th, and then the Planning Commission adopted the document on September 5th. So again, tonight you're just ratifying that approval. So I wanted to highlight some of the final changes that went through for the document here based upon input from the Planning Commission and Steering Committee. So I'm not going to go through and point out on the map specifically the changes, but you might recall on previous versions of the land use map, we had different stars that represented different locations for different community hubs and neighborhood villages and so forth. And there was a little bit of confusion about, well, what areas that really encompass and so forth. So we switched to a more traditional mode where we have basically one color for each of those different categories there and not stars. So you actually know geographically when you're in one of these areas and when you're not, right? We had to be kind of just careful with the colors to make sure they differentiated between the different categories. We also did a little final adjustment to the downtown framework diagram that's in the document to match the boundaries of the downtown hub land use category and the broader land use map. And so if you looked at that carefully from different versions, it basically meant that there were certain areas of downtown that we colored in on the downtown diagram, framework diagram, extending east over towards Frederick Way. We just made sure that every little area that was within that land use category on the bigger map was colored in on the downtown framework diagram as well. And there's your future land use plan in its final form. Again, the stars are gone. We now have different colors for different categories here. There really hasn't been a whole lot of change to this over the last handful of months, really. There's been a few little adjustments here and there to certain parcels based upon input from certain property owners and input from steering committee and planning commission and so on and so forth. But it's been reviewed and iterated and examined several times over. One thing which I can't remember if we talked about it back in July or not, but we did add the area west of Boulder Creek over to the county line and basically south of County Road 20 into your planning area. That area is kind of south of the current Longmont planning area. It was kind of in a no man's land where it wasn't part of any any particular municipality's planning area. And so we've just kind of colored in and provided the guidance that remains ag or open space. And so it's kind of status quo over there. It provides a bit of legal or land use guidance and protection for the folks who live over there out towards the county line and west of the creek. That's one thing to point out. And as we've discussed previously, there's also the area off on the east edge, the WCR 19 sub-area plan. That'll be added on here after adoption. The land use guidance for that will be a forthcoming effort, I guess, in the coming months to figure that out, working with Fort Lupton. So some other changes, just in terms of language, we added a guiding principle that speaks to having quality neighborhoods with diverse housing options. So there's a little more additional content brought in based upon input from the PC and steering committee, emphasizing the housing side and having diversity of housing options. We you might recall in previous versions of the document, we had some kind of recommended percentages for, hey, for this category, you should have 60% single family detached and 40% of something else. We've taken those out. That further definition and guidance for different land use categories we feel is probably better housed in the land use code update, which you're going to see in the coming months. And we've also, this is mainly just kind of housekeeping, we split housing and economic development as topics into separate chapters. That just basically meant we had to do a little bit more graphical work to separate them out. It wasn't a huge change. Those are pretty short chapters, but there was input from steering committee and PC that it made sense to at least have those broken out separately as you page through the document. There was also some just small adjustments here and there to density language and some of the ranges for density for different land use categories. If you looked at the document in detail, you'd see that. And of course, those are guidances. They aren't set in stone absolutely, but you know, they do kind of filter down towards your land use code update and things like that going forward. With housing, as mentioned, we provide a little more content on housing here to really emphasize the encouragement of creative housing strategies, which can be a variety of different things in the future, but it just provides the overall spirit that Frederick's open to a variety of housing ideas and housing types in the future. We added a few additional goals and action items for economic development. Those came from Max largely here in the kind of final review of the document. Transportation, we add a little more language to emphasize the multimodal aspects of the plan and also connections potentially long-term to regional transit. That might be further down the road, but it's good to leave it in the plan, at least for discussion. And then we also just went through and made sure that the graphics and images were all polished up and looking spiffy and crisp and just really a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that we do in finalizing a document. So again, like we kind of mentioned when we started this overall process, this is a great umbrella document that will assist us in completing the land use code update. So really drawing from the vision that we've established the comprehensive plan, we're now going to be going through and fine-tuning the land use code to make sure it works with the comprehensive plan and it actually provides the regulatory structure that the town can use going forth to bring that vision to life. It also informs Colby's efforts with the Go Frederick Outdoors 2050 plan. You see the little diagram on the right showing the Frederick Central Loop Trail diagram, which made it into the comprehensive plan. That's a overarching aspect that, we're assuming that this is going to be brought forth and really brought into more detail and analysis as part of that planning effort. This thing's a little slow. I had two there. Okay. It also informs the downtown plan, which we're working towards completion in the next few months. And it's also been guiding the Chris Park improvements that you've seen coming along the last several months as well. And as mentioned, it's also going to inform the sub-area plan kind of land use fine-tuning for that Weld County Road 19 corridor, which is basically the final 1 mile on the eastern edge of your planning area. And of course, as a governing body here and for city and for town staff as well, the comp plan provides the basis for just evaluating your different ongoing project applications and requests, site plans that come in the door, projects, your CIP, the whole 9 yards. And helps to organize the town's CIP and spending priorities going forward. And it also provides really an umbrella for any future planning efforts that come forth here in Frederick the next several years and beyond. So I think with that, we'll turn it back to Allie to go over some of the public notice and legal aspects here. The fun stuff.
This project was properly noticed according to the requirements in our land use code and the Colorado revised statute. Planning Commission did meet on September 5th, and they moved to adopt with conditions the Frederick Forward Plan and designate the future land use map as the 3 Mile Plan. The 2 conditions placed on the approval were add a conceptual map of the Frederick Loop Trail to Chapter 6 and add senior housing to the desired housing mix in neighborhood villages and community hub. Both of those conditions were included in the plan that you have in front of you this evening. The Pros Commission met on October 9th and moved to approve a resolution of support for the Frederick Forward Plan. They provided that the plan provides considerable guidance and community-led vision for the Go Outdoors Frederick 2050 plan. The staff recommendation is to ratify the Planning Commission's approval with conditions and adopt the 3 Mile Plan as presented this evening. Sorry, I just got tired. The motions in front of you this evening are a motion to ratify and a motion to not ratify. You have those 2 options. And our next steps, Britt already kind of went over, but we're continuing to work on the downtown plan and the County Road 19 land use designation with Fort Lupton. They've been a great partner in that. 2 full steam ahead on the land use code update, which we're excited to now work with Rick Engineering on that. And then 3, celebrate. Obviously, this has been a huge lift for our department, our community in general, for you all, for several other town departments. We are just we're so thankful for everyone's input. Everyone has been so gracious in the community to let us come into their places of work and worship, and it's just been a really wonderful opportunity to get to know our community. So thank you everyone for all the support, and specifically for Britt. We couldn't have picked a better consultant for this project. He has become a part of Frederick. I think he'll come hang out here after we're done with all of these planning efforts. So thank you. We're so proud to celebrate this plan with you all.
Great.
And that is the end. If we have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer them.
Good work.
Very good work.
Fantastic. Thank you all. That's like you said, it's a heavy lift. This is amazing. So, thanks.
Like, yeah, no problem. Took years off my life, but no problem. No worries. Would you like to discuss, or do you have direction tonight? Direction.
All right. Madam Mayor, I move that the Board of Trustees ratify the Planning Commission's September 5th, 2024 approval with conditions of the Frederick Forward Plan and of designating the Town of Frederick future land use map as the 3 Mile Plan, and to direct the town attorney to memorialize this ratification as a resolution for prompt execution by Mayor Kreitz without further action of the board.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Trustee Mahan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Trustee Padilla?
Yes.
Trustee Tavelli?
Yes.
Trustee March?
Yes.
Trustee Lamach?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Can I vote just this one time?
Sure.
Yes.
Mayor
Yes.
Grant?
Yes. 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 Yay. Congratulations. Yay. Congratulations. Go ahead. Brian, we have cake. Okay, it does sound like we have some cake, and maybe we can celebrate and spend a few minutes. Cake. Cake.
Nothing
Yes.
but cake.
Nothing but cake. Cute. Yes.
Buns cake?
Yeah, let's celebrate.
Did we do the same wow?
Nothing buns cake.
Yeah, let's celebrate. Maybe there's another time we can have a more formal celebration. That would be nice. Who got cupcakes? And thank you, whoever did that. Whoever took care of it. Tiffany, thank you. She's gone already. Okay, quick recess, grab a cupcake, and then we have one more. Well, we have a few more matters, but let's take a recess and celebrate. Do you use this?
I've never used that.
Has anybody ever used this?
I think
I did.
No.
Do you use it? Give it to me. Does she use? Why? Do people argue and you have to?
No, she just thinks it's funny.
Oh, okay. So she's not like.
No.
Okay.
That's an old one. We should
Mine
get
and
a new
St.
one.
Brain
It's
on
kind of vintage.
Way old.
It's pretty cool.
Really
Yeah.
neat. It's kinda
Yeah.
neat when you do that.
I mean, just think to yourself, this is what this whole room used to look like, is this wood color.
Yeah.
Every table that we had in this town hall was this color.
The wall behind you was that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we've evolved. Yeah. I'm so glad we've moved on from the oak era. Okay. We have, well, congratulations, everyone. Thank you. That was a great multi-year effort, Allie. Thank you so much. And let us know if there's anything we can do to help you feel celebrated and your team supported in carrying out all the pieces of that comp plan. So thank you. We have trustee reports. Anyone have any items they would like to address tonight?
I went to 2 committee meetings last week, which I was like finally able to go to them. The youth committee meeting, they were excited about helping out at Tiny Terratown. They proposed maybe next year adding a more older student, like youth aged element to it maybe later. So that was a good thought.
I like that.
And then I know that also I encourage them. We're going to be at 10 of the 20 commissioners as soon as we bring in those last couple people. But I pushed them and I said, if all 10 of you will invite and find one other person, you'll have a full committee. So I was like, if you can do that by December, maybe I can talk the board into throwing you a celebration.
Oh.
So I threw down a challenge in our name. Sorry, but I figured we could find a way to celebrate them if they can get their commission filled by December 31st. So that was good. And then the arts committee did finalize their went right out of my brain, Jason. Their bylaws. They finalized that. They picked their picture for the calendar, and they are also very excited and interested in looking to expanding the arts to being more than just visual in our community, but involving some other elements.
Right, so just to follow up on that and talking to Emily, we'll probably need to verify that the ordinance that deals with the Arts Commission, because they spend dollars on behalf of the town, also gets updated. So we're, rather than bringing those in 2 separate pieces, bringing the bylaws for y'all's approval along with those ordinance changes. So that's why it's a little bit of a delay.
And those are my committees.
Good to know. Thank you.
How many things this week?
Nothing over here? Okay, no, it's not boring. It's okay. We only have, 3 board meetings left before the end of the year, because we have 2? We have 2?
One in November.
So much to do. We have so much to do. No, we have 1 more in October.
Yes.
We have 3. We have 1 next week, next Tuesday.
It's a work session.
Okay, all right, but
Semantics.
because we canceled our
3 more
our work
times
sessions 3 more times together. Let's cherish it, everyone. Okay, we all know that though.
This is your hobby, remember.
This is my hobby. This is okay. Thank you for that reminder. Do we have an invite on the calendar for next Tuesday?
We will put it on, and I think Mayor will start at 7 because we have the open hours from 5:30 to 7. So I think we could plan on starting at 7.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. So I have mayor's office hours from 5:30 to 7. If any of you would like to join, you're always welcome to do that. Maybe we could notice those just in case.
What's the next one?
It is Tuesday.
Coming Tuesday.
this next Tuesday, 5:30 to 7.
On Tuesday night.
Yeah, yeah. And then we'll stay and have a work session, and we'll talk about the item that we discussed this evening. Yes?
In talking with Matt after we finished up this evening, he's hoping to be able to get us a clean version and also a red line based off of the comments that we received from the industry users, the various emails, and the folks that came this evening. So we'll hopefully have that by the end of this week so that you can have the time to digest that over the weekend so we can have a final discussion on Tuesday. So that way when we put it into the packet, it's more or less done. So we're not presenting red lines last minute.
It will be online, so.
Okay. Sorry, just to clarify the oil and gas conversation. We are redlining what and why?
So the current ordinance as it currently sits, making sure that the comments that we received this evening and or from the industry and Black Hills, making sure all that's incorporated in.
Okay.
Without, compromising the integrity of what we're trying to accomplish, as I understand it. And then make sure that we have that touch base with the board on that Tuesday to kind of go through, answer any final questions, make any additional adjustments if necessary. So that way when we put it in the packet for the November 12th meeting, it's a finished product and not in a raw form is the intent.
Okay. That helps. I just wanted to make sure that, and I hope I was clear on the item today, that was not what the direction was. The direction is to table the item and allow for LifeBridge to have a conversation with staff about a potential variance. But from my understanding, we're still considering this very same item as it sits on the 12th.
There were some suggested red lines that we got Friday afternoon.
Okay.
From staff and from updates based off of what our industry partners have asked for. And so rather than providing you all with a table file this evening and saying, we have some last minute changes, we wanted to make sure we were as transparent as possible and not bringing those forward. But a lot of those changes did make sense, and so that's part of it. We did talk with one of the representatives here this evening about the 50 by 100 and the standards of getting that, and so hopefully creating some clarifications as to when that applies, because I don't think it's intended to impact their property, or I guess impact them negatively. It should be in their benefit. And so working with Matt gave his contact information to that individual so that they could discuss, and then a variance may or may not be needed, I guess. Is what we're getting at.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe we can find out who LifeBridge is working with at KPK to get them to pay for plugging and abandoning their well. Anybody want to reach out and see who their contact is? Because that's great. I would like for that to happen everywhere else.
Clear to town representatives, Allie and myself, and Matt met with them as a part of our ongoing adventures with KPK. We had a conferral conference with them, and they indicated to us that they are more than happy to plug any well in the community as long as we come to the table with at least $250,000 per site.
$250,000 per site.
Correct. Which I anticipate is what
Adam's not having it.
messing with Life Fellowship. That's kind of been their
That was their number, even with
approach.
that.
I don't know what it is. They indicated hundreds of thousands, so I would anticipate that's kind of their standard response.
Okay. Gotta make money on their mistakes.
Sure.
Any other trustee reports?
Well,
No. All right. At this time, I would ask for board support to go into executive session for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators under CRS, section 24-64024E1 regarding fiber network build.
So moved.
Second.
Second, we'll allow a minute or two for the room to prepare itself, and we'll be right back.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, baby. See you in a bit. Vote on that.
Need to vote.